Step into Mind Matters, where we reveal the high-stakes world of CEOs, from their first-day jitters to game-changing strategies, and equip you with invaluable insights and practical advice essential for your personal growth and leadership journey. And now, Mind Matters.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Kendall Raisler, and today we're thrilled to have a remarkable guest on our podcast. He brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise as the president and CEO of Yampa Valley Bank. Would you please put your hands together and welcome PJ Wharton to our show? Welcome, PJ.
Hey, Kendall. Thanks for having me, and just an overwhelming applause that I'm hearing from across the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That's fantastic. We love feedback. You know, PJ, I'd like to jump in to ask you a bunch of questions. But before I do, I'd like our listeners to understand a little bit more about you and your background. Would you mind giving us a brief bio of anything that you feel is important, both personal and business?
You bet, Kendall. I'm blessed to live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, up in the mountains, where it's a resort town, and it's all about lifestyle up here. And the amazing thing about Steamboat Springs is you have like-mindedness. Generally, people are not on the fast track to somewhere else in regards to their careers. It is they've made it, or they have made a decision that lifestyle, quality of life, and community is first and foremost, as well as family. And I was one of those kids growing up in Pennsylvania that when it snowed, I could not sleep at night because I was just passionate about skiing, and was so fortunate to be able to get a job right out of college in Denver in 1989. And came up to Steamboat Springs in February with my job, and basically had that epiphany of, oh my gosh, this is the place I want to be. I was in downtown Steamboat Springs, small town, 12,000 people. It was snowing every day, has an idyllic downtown, beautiful shops, and a ski area 2 miles from downtown. So had that opportunity. And it took my wife and I 10 years to get here because, like many resort towns, very expensive, tough to get into the real estate market. But we basically kept it as this is our to-do list. And after 10 years, we were able to move here in 2004. Took over, moved here as a senior lender at Yampa Valley Bank. Yampa Valley Bank is a locally owned community bank, and that really matters in town because there are a couple big banks and they have not done a good job. So since I've been here, the primary competition, Wells Fargo, went from probably 45, 50 employees now down to 4. Yampa Valley Bank has gone from, when I joined, about 15 people. Today we're at 75 staff and assets of $615 million. So we've taken over from from Wells Fargo as the number one bank, and it's because of people. That's really what it comes down to. Is we've found the best people that are passionate about taking care of our community.
You know, that is a very important part. People are the most important thing in this world, and we tend to forget that in many different ways. And banks are notorious for only looking after bottom ends and lines. When you talk to me about how people are important, how you've grown it and taking so much, I want to taking so much business. I want to ask this question. I want to jump back to your first day, PJ. So you now come here, you got your role. What was it like? What was going through your mind? What was you emotionally thinking? And what were you thinking about the different plates that you had to spin? You had your directors, you had your people. If you can give us a little insight on that, would be wonderful.
You bet, Kendall. So back in 2010, I was given the opportunity to take over as president, and the person who recruited me was our previous CEO, Mr. John Kerst. And the guy is basically the godfather of banking in this community. He's an amazing man. But as you described, we had a very, very proactive board. We have a large board, 16 board members, and they were really ready for some changes. And by giving me that opportunity, there was a small minority that said, we want sweeping changes. We want dramatic changes. And as I looked at our performance, the bank had actually done really, really well. And from my perspective, it was, whoa, we've got a good thing going here. But the thing I really wanted to do is place more emphasis on our team. And that's probably the hardest part, I think, as a new CEO, is trusting those around you and having faith and hiring people that are frankly smarter and perhaps even better than you at your job. That's frankly a risk for a new CEO, because you're like, oh my gosh, Jim is really, really bright. Maybe he's going to knock me out of my position. But the reality is, putting faith in those people, allowing them to excel, we all succeed. And that's what we found over the past 13 years since I've taken over, is we have an amazing team that trusts one another. And by investing in them, the bank has grown, our board has prospered, and I've been able to keep my job. So overall, I'd consider it a success.
That is very successful. So I'd like to understand, when you're looking at your entrepreneurial side of you, because you have to have that, your leadership in the world, what tactics did you use for your team internally, for them to get to trust you, understand you? You're right. You had to find the right people, but you have to grow that culture inside of it. Is there anything you can share with our listeners for that?
You bet. From my perspective, again, it is finding those people that, number one, are incredibly bright and passionate about what they do. And from our perspective, it is about relationship in the banking world. And as a community bank, we do not have the bells and whistles, perhaps, of a Wells Fargo or a Chase. And I would say we are a moderate follower. We're not even necessarily a fast follower with the big time technology. Having said that, our community, being in a resort town, our customers travel extensively all over the world, and they are financially savvy, so they demand and expect great technology. So coming back to the people part, is having people who are willing to work as a team. And from our perspective, specifically on the loan side, we have big goals. We pay out bonuses for success, pay out bonuses for loan growth, etc. But the magic sauce for us is, it is not a win at all costs. It is about the team winning. So if the loan department achieves their goal, generally our loan officers are going to get that bonus and will exceed what they're looking for as well. So the bottom line is, all ships rise with a rising tide. And a great example would be, I had talked about, my previous world had spent some time with Wells Fargo, where they had very, very specific sales goals, which, as we all know, got out of control and led to a lot of trouble. But one of the things they actually brought up once was cross-selling and multiple, how many products per customer do we offer them? And it was interesting how my team said, no, do not do that. If you ask me to sell the customers and have goals, I'm out, because we are a bank that meets our customers' needs as opposed to jamming things down their throat. So that was a great learning opportunity for me to say, okay, you understand our customers, we want to meet their needs versus sell them stuff. And again, I think all you have to do is look at Wells Fargo and what happened with gaming the system and fake accounts and all those kind of things when sales pressure got out of control. So a great example from my perspective.
From my perspective, that is a fantastic example. People don't like to be sold, and we get sold a ton of things in today's world and pushed on to us. So I like the culture that you're pushing, or that you're bringing forward to your clients. I think a lot of our listeners will get a lot of value out of that. I'd like to ask you, what do you think was your biggest challenge that you had in the beginning of your journey as becoming CEO?
Trust of the team and trust of the board. I think all of us, when you're in a new position, you want to fast forward time to be able to prove yourself and say, gosh, if they knew me better, and you can't do that. And trust takes time to develop and establish. And I think, talking about my chairman of the board, his rule number one with me is no surprises. And, by establishing that, and I understand that okay, that's part of it, is the communication and being proactive. And anytime, unfortunately, things happen, but by having that active communication and proactive communication, we eliminate a lot of, potential risk. But going back, I had been successful previously, but there's nothing you can do other than put in the time and work on relationships to develop trust, both with your team. And the only way to do that is, living out by example. My joke is, chief president and CEO, and also janitor. If sometimes we got to plunge toilets too. So if I'm willing to do that and pick up trash on the way into the bank and leading by example, hopefully the rest of the team's going to do the same and think of me as a better person.
Very well said. Very well said. PJ, have you had any mentors that have helped you walk you through this? A lot of our CEOs, I want them to understand how the mentorship helped. And if you could, when you talk about your mentors, could you also help me break down the parts that they helped you with, if possible?
You bet. Going back to the person who hired me, John Kerst, who was the first president and CEO, and he had been managing all of the Mountain West for Wells Fargo and prior to that. And the thing about John that was amazing is he would teach you and bring you in, and you're okay, here we go. He's going to give me some, criticism, constructive criticism, but he always did it in a way that didn't make you feel insecure or bad. And the fact that you can have someone who can lead you along, give positive encouragement and perhaps constructive criticism without knocking you down. And, again, generally we're going to surround ourselves with people who are passionate what they do and they're trying to do their best, versus talking down to somebody or making myself feel better about myself by, degrading somebody. And I think he set probably the best example, and frankly, from his perspective, is servant leadership of don't be asking anybody to do something that you're not willing to do first. And so in my career, that was probably the best one for me. I've had others that, taught me in regards to sales, communication, presentation. And then my first chairman of the board, who is probably the hardest person I've ever had to work with, said something that I never would forget. And that was, until this bank, Yampa Valley Bank, is number one in the country, I know you can do better. So talking about setting a high bar.
That is a huge motivation. Yes. And push. Absolutely. So, I hear you talk about your board. I hear you talk about your people. I will ask you about your clients shortly, but that's a lot of plates you're spinning, PJ. And life-work balance is not a simple thing to keep in place. A lot of CEOs are running 16, 18 hours a day, and you can do that for a while. How did you handle your work-life balance?
Yeah, great question.
This episode is powered by Onist AI. Onist's optimized onboarding process and minimized documentation result in an expedited and seamless financing journey for clients, enhancing their contentment and commitment. Through identity verification, financial data validation, and creditworthiness assessment, our software empowers companies to make well-informed financing choices, bolster application speed and customer uptake by 30%, and cut operational costs by a significant 70% with Onist AI. For more information, visit onist.ai.
Kendall. Yes, having 3 boys, and we were thrilled. That was the goal with my wife and I, Amy, was to get to Steamboat, and that our boys could grow up in a small community, play every sport known to man, whether it be fall would be either football or tennis, winter was hockey and skiing, springtime was skiing and lacrosse. So there was always something going on, and being involved as a coach with hockey and other sports. Bottom line was, I tried to have a very definitive wall between the bank and home. And as we all know today, that's pretty blurred, and you can get texts and emails 24/7. But frankly, I do not do a lot of work on the weekends or in the evenings. And I think I'm kind of blessed with banking that it isn't necessarily 24/7, but my team knows, and I expect the same out of them, is when we leave here, generally, if it's not an emergency, we're not going to ask you to either come in or respond to emails or texts. And again, going back to, leadership qualities, my predecessors really emphasized of, hey, it is okay to have separation, and it's not a competition. I think that's a really important part, is that I say this to our leadership team: this is not a competition to see who can work the longest and the hardest. And if it's going to be that way, we're going to lose our team, because again, in the mountains, the quality of life issue is a really big reason a lot of us moved here. So if I start asking people to work 60 hours, even 50 hours, they're going to say, I can do this somewhere else, or I can work remote and have a better lifestyle. So all in all, there are times when I ask folks to stay late, stay weekends, we have an audit or other time sensitive issue, but generally at 5 o'clock, people are gone. And then the other aspect, which is really interesting, we during COVID started allowing our employees to bring puppy dogs to work. And that sounds probably stupid and silly, but I got to tell you, once we opened the lobby back up, we had one opportunity where we had a customer who frankly was pissed off. He saw the dog, started petting the dog, and then he forgot what he was mad about. So that was 4 years ago. My yellow lab is underneath my feet right now. We have 1 or 2 dogs in the lobby, and I got to tell you, it's probably one of the best things we've ever done.
That makes a lot of sense, especially for the area you're in, and I like that type of a leadership. And you said something really key that I want to point out to our listeners. It's not a competition. It's not who puts in the most. It's about group results and how you work together. And I say that because of your words and because so many people think I got to work longer is better, harder is better, it's smarter. It's working as a team is what I'm hearing from you. So thank you for that. I'd like to jump into scaling your business now. Now you're wanting to scale your business, and you touched on it. You want the people to have their work-life balance, which is fantastic. And in today's world, in scaling the businesses, there's some challenges with inside of our culture of our companies. Like, I can work from home. The younger generation than myself, they like to have that freedom, work from home, and easier to do. The older generation had to be there 5 days a week, this time, couldn't leave your desk, all that. How are you handling that type of transition?
Yeah, it's been an amazing change. Again, as for all of us, right? It goes back to COVID. And we shut down the lobby, obviously, as everyone else did. And then what happened was we could not find help. And we had open positions, skilled positions, and we could not find people. And the other major problem, again, being in a resort community, real estate is so brutally expensive. We would have, even at an officer, a VP level, a job offer where the person accepted from Denver would come up, and in one example, spent 1 day looking at real estate, came back and said, I'm sorry, bye-bye, I'm out, it's too expensive. So we were forced, but we looked at remote employees. So predominantly non-customer facing, doing analysis, specifically in loans, but it's actually changed since then. And we've gone from 0 employees who were remote just 3 years ago to now 12, which represents about 15% of our employees. Montana, Orlando, Oklahoma, Iowa, most are stay-at-home moms that need to have that flexibility and work at different times of the day, and generally are doing the behind the scenes analysis, loan administration. But we've also had 2 employees that moved due to relationships, one to Wyoming and one to DC, that now are doing customer service for us. One of the greatest ideas we had is, like many folks, everybody wants to answer me, Yampa Valley Bank, to answer our phones. We had a phone system that was traditional. We were able to go to one that was at the cloud level. So therefore, our remote employees could answer phones from anywhere in the country. And that has, number 1, improved our customer service. And number 2, enabled us to rehire people who had left Yampa Valley Bank. And they're thrilled employees because they love the culture that we have here. And again, as I said, we're now at 12 throughout the country. And it's really worked out great for all parties.
Technology makes a big difference in today's world. It's something that scares a lot of people, but you use it for the growth, and it makes sense because it creates efficiencies, but people still want to deal with people. When you're dealing with clients, and this is where I said I would touch on the client side, how do you figure out the new products for them? What is needed? Our CEOs that we talk to, some have different ways of doing it. How do you do it?
Yeah, great question, Kendall. First and foremost, it's fascinating how, just 10 years ago, we were all told brick and mortar banks are done. And I would argue, in an urban setting, that makes sense because it's difficult to get to your bank, traffic, all those things. But in rural communities and in resort towns, customers still want to come in, meet face to face. Our lobby is packed and people love to come in and talk to our tellers. But going back to technology, as I said, like most banks, our customers are pretty darn savvy and they're traveling throughout the world. So we needed to offer them the services to provide them the ability to bank when they want, where they want. So number one, we have a robust online banking system. For everybody to understand, banks are kind of at the mercy of our core provider, which is, our basic, all things computers is generally one core provider. For us, it's Fiserv. And to just deviate from that, from a technology, you just can't add any and all software. But having said that, we've worked for, remote deposit capture, i.e. taking a picture of a check and sending that in, as well as online banking, as well as all kinds of fraud protections, what we call cash management, which is direct deposit predominantly. And then things just creative, what we call free to roam. So if you're a client of ours, and we only have 2 branches, Steamboat and Craig. If you go anywhere in the country, the domestic US, and want to get cash, so you're at the Denver International Airport and they charge you $5, number one, we're not going to charge you anything. And number two, we'll refund that $5 fee. So now our ATM system is bigger than Wells Fargo or Chase or anybody because you can go anywhere. So, so from all of those items, I think from our perspective, it's saying, okay, what do our customers want? We don't have to, and we can't frankly afford to drop millions and millions of dollars on technology, but understanding what our customers expect and being able to provide them. And then last but not least, it has to be up, meaning it has to work. And, we saw that during COVID was when we had to close the lobby, the line went out to the street, so if we wouldn't have online banking, online bill pay, all these things, it wouldn't have worked because we've grown too much.
You would have inundated yourself. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I wish I had more time, PJ, to speak with you. We like to keep these podcasts to half an hour, but I'd like to offer a secondary time for you to come back in the future as a follow-up if you're interested. I believe that our guests and our listeners are going to get a lot of value from this. But more importantly, I believe your customers are going to see an awful lot from this as well. So thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed having you on here and getting your insights. Listeners will totally understand what is happening and give them some insights to move forward. So thank you very much, PJ. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. We will see you next time on Mind Matters.